Welcome to Building with Buyers. I am so excited because Eric has joined me. Eric Holland is a recovering product marketer. I love the way you put that. Aren't we all recovering from
No, right?
something?
No
We're all
one puts it,
recovering.
no one puts it in their header, but
No
that's
one
me.
does. We all say product marketer, but you say recovering. Recovering product marketer who quit his job to focus on custom messaging assistance. That's number one. And number two is interactive demos. We're going to talk high level first, but I just want to give a little background on these two specific areas. So, founder at Mojo PMM. This is where we're actually starting to work together on this. I recently joined Eric as the first ever messaging whisperer at Mojo. So, Mojo is where you burn your boring messaging doc because now you have a custom messaging assistant that creates bold persona specific messaging for anything you need that your whole team wants to use. And when I say anything you need, it's actually pretty crazy, the list of things that Mojo can handle. So that's Mojo PMM. And then Demo Dash, your co-founder, you've already built, is it 75? Is it more now? Like over 75 interactive demos that are shipped
Yeah,
for Navattic.
we're over 100 now.
Oh, you're over 100. Man,
Yep.
I'm behind.
No, probably my LinkedIn is probably behind, but yeah, that's
That's a
100
lot
over the
of
last year and change.
That's crazy. So that's actually how we met through Navattic. I work with Navattic as well, and we I saw you in person last year when we did that event. So that was pretty fun. And you're also the co-host of the We're Not Marketers podcast. So you got a lot going on. Why are you calling it We're Not Marketers? Can you help me understand? You're a recovering product marketer. Is that kind of where that's going? Like you're not a marketer because you're
Um,
recovering?
there's a lot of, I think we're at 70 episodes now and we try to get to the bottom of this, but the root of it is there's a lot of marketing activities. You can kind of all think of them that there's a lot of specialists out there that know how to do those things, right? Product marketers typically do not know how to do those things as well. And so that's why I say we're not marketers. And on the flip side, there's things that product marketers do that the rest of the people on the marketing team just aren't as good at either. So that's really, I think, the easiest way to explain it.
So there's specific skills that product marketers have and specific skills that other marketers have.
Yeah.
And so
That goes
you're
far beyond the nuance of just like communication and writing, right? Like the nuance that goes into between the two, I think is where the name We're Not Marketers comes from.
nice. So if you want to listen to that, it sounds like you're exploring that's that theme specifically on the show and you're still exploring. Building with Buyers is my show. And so it's a show that explores the role that customers play in helping companies build to their next level of growth. And that includes how the best marketers and founders use customer curiosity to help inform positioning, messaging, and growth. And so we're not going to talk about all of those things in this episode. I actually just want to focus on messaging. Just let's focus on messaging this time around. I think
Favorite.
it's my favorite too, actually. And so let's talk about messaging. So, on turning messaging into copy with the help of AI, let's just start with this fire topic. Right now, people, especially marketers, are talking about how they're arguing, really. They're not talking, they're arguing that this cannot be done well, turning messaging into copy with the help of AI, because we're seeing a lot of AI slop out there. And so I think that's kind of, why people are arguing that you just can't do it. But what do you think is wrong with this argument? I'd love to hear from you because, well, because of Mojo, right? Like let's just chat about that for a second.
Yeah, and if you just take the statement for face value, I think you're right. Like, you can't just use off the shelf AI to really get really good copy. I've tried, and be honest, I was using Claude way before everyone's made the switch over. So the Great Migration, I've been paying for, all three of the major LLMs for about 2 years, and I've never seen it just give me really good copy when I just ask it to.
You're talking about all three.
Yeah, just like out of the box, me asking it for so like it never really goes the way I want it to go. At least in that first five, six, seven prompts.
I feel like Claude was actually ahead of at least ChatGPT because I was using both. And I feel like Claude was always just like better at words and writing and humanizing stuff, but still not great.
Yeah, I agree. Like there was always this like I would go into Claude anytime I was like I need some help with like copy, right? And then I cracked that nut on the, you know, the Mojo side of things, and that all lived in ChatGPT for forever. So for the longest time that's all I was doing my copy from. And now I've been able to kind of move it between all the platforms so they all work the way I wanted to. But you know, to your original question, like, yeah, like out of the box is not going to be great. And I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but even I've noticed since the Great Migration occurred, my Claude is writing worse from the default stuff.
Really?
Oh yeah, I'm having so like luckily I've got it structured most of the time now. I can just ask it to reference skills, but boy, when I just need like a quick hitter and I'm being a little lazy and don't want it to go through the whole process, I'm like, wow, yeah,
Don't do it, Eric.
there's
Don't do it.
clearly something that happens when you have everyone writing bad stuff and injecting the LLMs with bad stuff that you just kind of get that. So, you know, if you're not taking the extra time to figure out what are the best ways to write, how do you actually write? And I mean that not in the terms of like examples, like how does your brain make decisions while writing? And you probably don't even know those answers. To be honest, I didn't either until I started thinking about it. But that's really how you go from my AI is not really a good writing partner to wow, I would have not come up with that myself type of thing. And I really think that's kind of the difference. So there's I think again surface level you can make that argument, and then once you kind of go that layer deeper, for anyone who hasn't really thought about what is the best way to write and how would you teach a child how to write like you, then yeah, you're not ever going to get a good set of writing.
I think people are wowed by fast. So that's the thing that people are wowed by. When they're using these tools, they're like, I can do it. Or let's just ask the tool to do it. Oh my gosh, it's so fast. Wow. Right. But the slop is coming out because that's all that they're wowed by is the fast. And they're not necessarily wowed by the decisions that the tool is making because there's no back end infrastructure for what does good writing look like? What should we say? Why should we say that? Does it tie back to the things we know about who we're writing for? That's just not how it works in these tools for the masses. So I think product marketing teams are moving faster with AI for sure, but not necessarily making better decisions. And we just talked about why. What's really like the broken part of the process? What's broken when you're trying to go from messaging to copy? I think there's a few things that are broken in the whole marketing toolbox. Workflow, and we've talked about that, Eric, about some things that are broken. Personally, from my side, I talk a lot about and work on the buyer research and turning that into, helping inform positioning messaging that comes from actual conversations with buyers. But there's another part that's broken right now, which is turning messaging into copy, like good copy, right? So what is broken there?
What you led right into it, right? It's like there's a whole decision making process that goes into a messaging. Like check approved, right? All the decisions that go into that, there's a lot of that going on, and you handle a big portion of that end of it. Of okay, what decisions are we going to make to say that this is our messaging approved? Everyone start using it. But then after you say approved, there's all these other decisions that need to be made on how you start using it, right? And I've been fortunate enough to have been around the block in about 4 years working in-house in software. Prior life, a lot of other writing, but actually taking messaging documents that I've had to make and writing something with them. not just handing them over to someone else to do the writing, but like physically having to go be like, all right, how do I turn this weird strategical document that only really makes sense in my head anyways, because I made it, and then turn that into something customer facing? And then, is that thing I created any good? Is it not? And spending about 4 years and lots of different assets, from web pages, I literally wrote email templates for our sales team for about a 3-month period. That was very painful. Lots of different web pages, ads. You figure out, okay, this is how you actually do the translation piece. But there's so many of us that don't really know and don't nerd over the people who do know, right? And write these types of assets all the time, and the best practices that go into all of them. And so I think it's foolish to then say, well, how are you going to have AI do all this, right? They don't know the best practices. They don't know how to make those decisions. And even something as simple, I think, as like a brand voice guide, right? Very few people actually have an instructional way to make certain decisions. It's more of like this lofty, this is how we feel as a brand. This is the personality. But like, what are the decisions that you make into actually making sure the brand comes together in words, sentence structure? And the thing that we all need to hit on is emotion. So
it's
I
like
find it to be broken.
You put all this effort into the deck or into the slides or into the doc, and then it's like, oh, this is wonderful. And then the hardest part is, how do you carry that out? How do you act on it, right? And I think that it's been the hardest part forever. I mean, like, it's not easy. Writing is not easy. For the people that know how to do it well, it is not easy. And so I think the consequence of that is like everybody just kind of goes rogue and does their own stuff. And sure, we have a doc, but what does that mean? And what does it mean for the sales team? And what does it mean for, other folks on the marketing team? Because we're not all, somebody created that doc, but maybe like it comes easy to them to create the next pieces, but not for everybody, for sure. So tell me about where Mojo fits into all of this. And I kind of know already, but I still want to ask you, because you say it really well. Where does Mojo fit into all this? Like, what job is it meant to do for folks?
Well, I think the main job is not make it so hard to go from we've approved this messaging to we've approved this physical asset that's going out to our customers / prospects. Doesn't really matter what asset it is, like you can name it. Very few people can turn that around in a week, let alone a day. And what's interesting is, when you use Mojo, that all changes. Your whole concept of like, what can we turn around changes. Because I think, the first break in all of this is I hand over a messaging document as a product marketer to someone. Let's just, for the sake of argument, we'll talk about writing for now. And so then that person is playing a game of telephone with that messaging document and trying to translate what is actually on this thing. And you're spending all this time on what are we going to say? And I think marketers in particular, they're creative. Their juices should be spent on how are we going to say it. And by the time that you get down to it, you spend all that time on the other end and you've sucked all of your brain power on the creative end. And so people go over rendition or rendition or rendition, and then you get to the approval stage. And again, there's no rules or decisions on how you get from messaging document to copy. So the hippo, or highest paid person in the room, makes the decision on what actually gets put out there, and the review and approval process is a whole nother messy thing. So I think that's where I really was looking to build Mojo, was let's cut out all of this translating process. And then when it comes to review and approval, you can kind of get an assistant to check that work. Because the word, I hear it all the time from CMOs. They don't like having 3 emails, a landing page, and a few ads that they need to approve, and it just backing everyone up and them feeling like they're the bottleneck. So it makes them feel a lot easier when they can run it through Mojo, or their teammate send it to them and say, hey, this has been run through Mojo. It gives them a lot more confidence that they can give that check mark, because they know, okay, we've already agreed on how to make decisions on the messaging document. That's been approved. We've already made decisions on how to turn that messaging into these individual ads. That's approved. And we've already talked about how to make decisions about brand voice and that's been approved. So, your time you get from a week in some instances. I know web pages go up to like a month, and now you're cutting everything in less than a week in all of these cases. And I personally get to use it all the time, so I get amazed all the time when I can just whip up 4 competitive landing pages about why you should come to our event as opposed to other events. And it took me, I'm not kidding you, 9 minutes to do 4 of them, get them designed, and they were now up in our webpage.
So it's still fast, but I think the difference between this and the just out of the box ChatGPT or Claude or whatever tool you're using is that the thinking is in there, right? Because I think that writing, messaging, and turning that into copy, like having a way to turn that into copy, involves 2 things. Like it is a craft, and it involves the thinking, and it also involves the writing part. And so the thinking part is missing. I mean, you kind of have to do the thinking first, right? As you build the Mojo for different people. The thinking is the structure that's built into the tool. So that's part of it, but also you've put a lot of thinking into this, right? And so that's not present in the other tools as you're trying to like create things.
No, I think a great example of that is if you watch the ChatGPT version, right? Like if you just say, write me a homepage for whatever, it will tell you what it's thinking about. Right? And then if you go do that on Mojo, you'll see the difference in how, okay, this is like, it's actually cognitively going through different decisions, finding forks in the road, picking the right one, and then we've now landed on an asset. And I think that is like the real moment for everyone when I show them in the demo. I'm like, pull up your instance, write yourself a homepage, pull up mine, and you can see it's thinking differently. And
Yeah.
I actually had a customer, she goes, you know why I bought this? And I said, why? She goes, because I'm buying your brain. And you thought about all this stuff.
It's the thinking. Yeah.
And that's really what it is. If you don't spend the time thinking first, writing all of it down, documenting it, which we've all never done before, yeah, you're never going to get the outputs you want. You're never going to be able to scale your approach to messaging. And likelihood is your sales team and your marketing team is just going to keep shooting from the hip, because that's all they know how to do.
Right. But that doesn't mean that we can stop thinking as marketers. Like, okay, you've got Mojo, now you can stop thinking because Mojo does the thinking for you. I actually don't think that's not the point. The point is, like, it's still a tool and you still need to know what you're doing. But the point is that now the thinking is based on something that's worthy of, good writing and good decision making. So it's not like you have to stop thinking. I think that's step 1 always for working with any tool, whether it's Mojo or Excel or whatever. But it has that like context now and every single time, which is really hard when you work with a tool and then you just have documents and then you ask somebody to approve and then they have to think about, okay, let's review what's in the document. Like that is a now old-fashioned process, right? There's a better way. So I get it. I see it. I think folks that are using this tool, I'm using it now. I'm not using, like for writing, I just go straight to Mojo because it's now I can see that it's better, right? If I were to go, just like you said, if I were to go back to the tools that don't have that structure in place, it's just not going to be as good because it's not pulling from that infrastructure. Tell me more about like what are the things that are key in terms of like how Mojo thinks, like the brain. What's like super important about the way that it's built to think the way that a product marketer should think and to make decisions the way that product marketers should make decisions? Like what would you call out as the main?
Well, the first thing that I think sets like the foundation for all of it is like the positioning and messaging brain, as I call it. So I've essentially created an SOP for exactly how I think about positioning and messaging. Like every little weird detail that you can imagine. It's like I have written that out, and how I, make decisions on what is positioning. You need to have a glossary, define terms, because I think that's also a big thing for the AI, but also internally. You remember I commented on one of your posts and I was like, wait, are you sure this isn't a feature? And you're like, no, it's a benefit. Like,
Yeah.
that discourse and disagreement in glossary terms is a huge part of why AI and your internal teams aren't operating on the same page. So, like, creating that standard operating procedure is huge. And then the next step would be the application piece of it. So, like, how do you apply the positioning into consistent ingredients? Because if you're pulling like benefits for certain things and then like not putting them in other things, that just doesn't make sense. So you need to have like a consistent level of how you're using these ingredients, as I call them. Then the next step, I think that's really important, is like choosing the right messaging. So if you're a really simple, Calendly for years was basically just like book a meeting. But even with that, they had segments, right? Sales, and then consultants or business owners who needed to book meetings. So they had different messaging scenarios. So you need to create an operating procedure on like, when I'm in this scenario, what messaging do I go pull from? And what messaging do I just like ignore completely? Because that's, again, like an AI isn't going to be trained on that naturally. So you need to tell it like how to make those decisions and pull the right ingredients in the first place. And then I think the one that I've spent the most time on, and if people were to ask me like the secret sauce, I'd say it would be like the first three, because it's how my brain really thinks. But this last one is the one I think of why people buy me. And it's how you translate your ingredients into written deliverables and campaign ideas. For months and months, people are like, yeah, you can't use it to think for you. And like, I'm going to be honest, all of my content now, basically, my content days start with a lot of Mojo doing content ideas for me, because I've downloaded how do I think about content, and so it's just a faster version of doing what I do. But when you were to ask something for a homepage, regardless of what the messaging's fed it, you will probably get like 10 different outputs with 10 different formats when you ask any of these LLMs. So I've spent a lot of time on like, what's the best version of a homepage, a top of funnel ad, a cold email that your rep sends. And so instead of pulling a bunch of bullshit information that regular LLMs has been fed, you're getting like very specific best practice and format stuff. And so I doubt anyone in the world is going to get an output that says, hey, you should put an interactive demo right below your hero on your homepage. But that's something that's coded into Mojo, because I believe that is the best practice, right? So
Yeah.
There's that nuance, I think, that people don't get into in terms of how do we translate our messaging into a customer prospect facing asset.
Yeah. So just kind of trying to tie this, I actually wanted to say one other thing, like how hard it is working inside companies as a product marketer, working with clients, to get everybody to use the top 3 benefits consistently. To get everyone to use, it is so darn hard. Like, I'm just thinking back to my own experience, right? And so I think that's like, just, I can't emphasize enough like how this now solves that problem. Because you just use Mojo. Like, use Mojo. It's got everything custom built into it. For every single, like for me, you built a custom Mojo, right? It's got my stuff built into it based on the, messaging canvas and point of view and all of that. If you just use Mojo, then you don't have to run after people and like remind them or feel awkward because the salesperson again forgot. Like, those are the things that we want to talk about, not that other thing that they were using maybe a few years ago. That's not it anymore. Things have changed, right? This just makes the process way easier. So wanted to reiterate that.
It's the best compliment I think you can receive, is being told, hey, I don't have to police our messaging anymore. And that is the real goal. It's a whole nother topic, and I'm sure we could do another podcast on it, but I firmly believe the most expensive part of your go-to-market is all of that inconsistency of messaging. And it's also unfair because we're doing the messaging, so we know how all of the things fit in the frameworks and so on and so forth. All of the people we're delivering that to haven't been trained on messaging and positioning and the nuances that went into that exercise. So I think if we're all just more cognizant of that, give a Mojo maybe, it just makes for that environment where you're not policing who's saying what and what's getting on what page and so on and so forth.
Right. Absolutely. So just to kind of tie everything back together, like if product marketers or marketers, sometimes it's not product marketers, sometimes depending on company size, right? It's just the marketing person that has ChatGPT, that has Gong, that has win-loss notes, that has those customer calls. They're trying to make ends meet with these tools. Why hasn't that fixed messaging? Why doesn't that work, Eric? Why do we need Mojo?
Well, we also need you, but to start off, I was in a thread a couple weeks ago about Gong and not having a feature set for product marketers. I'm like, guys, listen, they have made a go-to-market decision that product marketers are not going to drive them a bunch of revenue as much as we want them to. So if you're just using Gong and, again, not really pulling out the insights and not thinking like we talked about and how those insights need to get pulled and where they get bucketed to and how you're tagging them and so on and so forth, you're just using a child playing with a whole bunch of data that's really fast at it. So, that's part A, is we got to get people who are using intelligent means to sort through their customer words and thoughts and feelings. So that makes it into the messaging approval stage. I think that has to happen way more. Anna, we joke about it all the time. Like in my work, I don't do that with my clients because that's just how I've priced and packaged. But I do firmly believe that every really, really tight messaging happens from word of mouth, word of thought from your customers and your prospects.
And I 100% believe that. So.
Yeah, like it's you got to do it. And there's ways now to make that faster instead of a 6-month engagement where you might get 30 calls and 20 accounts you've kind of sorted through, and you can really expand that and make that a more breadth of your base in a lot shorter time. And then I think people just have to realize that working with AI makes it really easy, but there's all this hard work you have to do first. Or someone's going to do it for you, but you're going to have to wait for them to do that, and then you're going to have to pay people like me to implement it, right? And so that's a great thing for a lot of people because, frankly, they don't have time. But if you do want your AI, it doesn't matter if it's messaging or otherwise, but in this case, if you want people to use your messaging, you better figure out how to use it first from a manual perspective. And then codify all of that into your AI, and it will listen. But there's no point in even using AI with your teammates and scaling your messaging approach if you're not willing to get your hands dirty for dozens, even hundreds of hours to figure out the right mental processes, the right decision-making frameworks, and just a standard operating procedure for everyone.
Totally. So if you want to build this yourself, by all means.
400 hours, give or take.
400 hours, give or take. If you want to build this yourself, by all means. But don't just use ChatGPT to turn messaging into copy. And
don't upload your messaging document.
Don't upload your messaging document. Because that's not enough anymore. That's it. Like we've moved to another level of structure and backend and infrastructure and brain for these LLMs, right? The brain is smarter, needs to be smarter now. So I don't know who's listening to this. There are all different levels of experience out there, right? There are more experienced product marketers and less experienced product marketers and marketers in general, and even founders listen to the show too. But I think that I'm really excited about Mojo. I think that it opens up, like you were saying, Eric, it opens up the effort and brain power that you've been using on your left side. You should still be thinking and using your left side of the brain, but it opens up that time and energy so that you can be more creative, because isn't that why we got into this work in the first place? Is to be strategically creative, right? So anyway, I wanted to end with that. Eric, thank you for joining me. If anybody wants to connect with Eric, he's on LinkedIn, Eric Holland, not a marketer. Yeah, that's what it is. Eric Holland, not a marketer. We should do another episode about that, like figuring out, are you a marketer or are you not a marketer? And if you're not, then what are you?
I might need a therapist in the room, but I'm game.
That's another episode. And then if you want to check out Mojo, go to mojopmm.com. And Eric, I, of course, super love talking to you about this. It's really an exciting time. I think what I look for is these arguments, right, that people are having about messaging and writing in general. And I get newsletters about this topic. I think that it is just like a space that is on fire right now. And so we all need to make our own decision about what we think, right? How we see ourselves as writers going into the future. And I think that there's something exciting that is brewing with Mojo. And I'm excited to work with you on it.
Me too. Gonna be more excited to have my first Mojo monster and to have it be you. Dream come true.
Awesome. I can't wait for that. Hopefully it'll have headphones, because I'm always wearing these headphones.
I'm putting the creative brief in tomorrow, but headphones is already on it.
It's on it, 100%. Awesome. Can't wait. All right, Eric, thank you so much.
Anytime, Anna. Thanks for having me.